Hello and welcome back to Esther's Gardening Adventures. I'm Esther and I'm at my beautiful community garden, and in this episode I'm going to talk about what went right and what went wrong in my, or maybe could do better, in my first year of renting this community garden plot. So by way of background, I've rented this from the county in my state this year. There's plenty of lessons learned, and let's start off with the fact that I rented the garden and my choice for taking on a community rental garden. Am I glad I did it? Let's get going and find out. All right, so this is how the plot looked when I took it on. Boy, was it a hot mess. Full of weeds and just really hard to clear. There was fabric cloth or weed suppressant under the weeds with the roots going through, and I tried clearing some of it. I ended up paying a gardener's husband to help me clear it, and boy, was it worth every penny. Now there was a ditch in the front, and one of the gardeners has suggested I put it around the perimeter of the garden to help it drain during high rain seasons. Well, I ended up having them add the ditch, but I think it ended up being a problem, and here's why. Well, for starters, I had to put some boards down. Luckily, there were some boards already in the garden to put down, but I had to put some boards down across the ditch in the front of the bed just to be able to cross it safely and to haul things across. And it really was a problem because I needed to have it wide enough to fit the cart, and it just really ended up being a huge hassle. But also, when I am actually working in the garden, I'm not always aware of my surroundings, and I'm definitely a klutz. Not only did the ditch actually provide a place for voles to hide and for weeds to grow, but it also made it hard to actually work in the garden around the edges of the beds, on the far side. It meant that I had to be careful not to trip when I was pulling things out. You just saw me trip a second ago. And I think I'm actually going to fill these in with mulch that the county has provided this fall, so that it can still drain a little bit, but it won't be such a hazard to my health. Another thing I did in the garden this year in my rental garden was I did both dug up beds as well as no-dig beds. And the gentleman, Mr. C, in the garden here, who's sort of the veteran of the area, he said that not to put cardboard down because it would just be a place to harbor voles. Well, I think what he meant was to not put cardboard down when it came to just setting it to cover up weeds as weed suppression. But I took that to heart, and I didn't end up doing what I had planned, which was to use no dig beds to suppress the weeds. Now this row here, now granted I have not weeded the path for a while, but this row here is one, I think I only did one this year, where I actually did a no dig bed and I used cardboard. What that means is you use cardboard and then you put your gardening materials, your compost, whatever you want to put down. I used a combination of stuff. I used leaf mulch or leaf grow, I used worm castings, I used slow release granules, all that stuff. And this row by far has the least amount of weeds and the least amount of works in the row where the plants are themselves. And I think next year I'm going to do the same, except I'm actually going to do it in the paths. I have been saving up paper and cardboard, and I'm going to mulch at the beginning of this fall. I put down the paper and I'm going to mulch over it to help suppress the weeds between the rows as well. And I think that'll make a huge difference. Also for peppers, something that I kind of cheaped out on, I guess you could say, is when I had a bunch of bamboo sticks, I wanted to provide trellising for my peppers. I sort of did different heights of bamboo sticks for the trellising. And peppers really can use, especially for the ones that produce bell peppers, can use better trellising. I mean, look at this poor bell pepper that I haven't propped up. It's got some really beautiful peppers on it, but the stake definitely was not high enough, and I just didn't keep up with tying things up as well, even if I had just tied it up a little more. So I think next year I'm going to use bigger stakes or sticks, taller. When I say bigger, I mean taller stakes than this, 4-foot stakes, to help support the peppers a little bit more. One of the things that I got too late in my community garden was putting up any kind of trellising. This beautiful trellis here I got from, believe it or not, Costco, and I really am glad I put it up because I'm getting some beautiful bitter melon from it that I've been giving away to people. Oh, there's another one, see? But the last 2 years on my home garden, I've actually grown a lot of Christmas lima beans. I love fresh garden grown lima beans. And this year I just didn't get to it. I have one measly lima bean plant that hasn't really even put out any pods. And next year I want to grow more lima beans. I'm going to grow more vining things. So I'm going to make having more trellising a bigger priority. Look how gorgeous it is too. It's really beautiful. And I used the other trellis for my Asian long beans. So I still was able to get some trellising benefits, you know, but I think that this year I could have done a lot more with trellising and vertical gardening, and next year I just want to do a lot more with that if I can. So here's the garden fence. I'm gonna see how close I can get without hurting the mic. I need to cut this guy back. Look here. Look how tall this thing is. This is a nice tall fence. In fact, this is new this year, I was told. So it's really good quality. One of the things I struggled with this year, and you can see it's already happening, was cutting back the weeds and keeping them contained. I had a real problem this year I was so worried about the rest of the garden that I really didn't maintain this back fence. And one day I just came and I finally took care of it all. But I think this is a huge space here. From the back row all the way to here, it's probably a good 8 feet, maybe 6 to 8 feet. There's plenty of room to add another row back here and to use it for trellising. And if I need to get stuff up top, I mean, this is another point I wanted to show you, which is learning from your neighbors. Look at these beautiful beans that they have over there. Trellising is coming into my plot, which is totally fine. Very nice people that rent that plot. And over here, my neighbor, his squash plants and his gourds and things have gone up over this fence. So clearly I can make use of my own space. So when it came to water issues, so there's no water provided at this location. Some places do provide water, and some have running tap water that you can go and fill up at a spigot. Some have just sort of a big barrel of water or something that people can come and use, and I've heard those run out fast. In this case, this community garden does not provide water on site. So I knew coming in that I would have to be hauling water. And I bought these big 6-gallon sort of camping water holders that worked really well. They were very heavy, 6 gallons of water. I probably could fill it to 4 gallons comfortably and carry it, but I had to use carts and wheelbarrows and other things to get it from the car all the way here without hurting my back over an extended period. And I still probably didn't have enough water. And there is a creek on the other side, a small stream, actually I wouldn't call it a creek, on the other side of this fence line, about probably 20 feet in. And next year I'm going to brave it and actually go in there and try to set up a pipe to a hose to bring water from there into here. I've got all the materials for it. I just need to make it happen. But there's a couple things. So one, if you're going to have to haul water, make sure you have something to help you carry it, like a cart or a wheelbarrow or something. If it's too heavy to carry a whole bunch of them, you can do them in 1 gallon, milk jugs, which I had plenty of leftover that I didn't use this year for winter sowing. And then also, if you can set up some kind of catch or containment system to catch rainwater. Now, ideally, I'd have something like a mosquito dunk or something to keep mosquitoes from spreading. And during the summer, I would close this off with the lid to keep mosquitoes from breeding in it, but now I've just kind of given up. There's tons of swallows, barn swallows, and bats in the area, so they keep the mosquitoes quite at bay. But if you can have something, especially if you know it's going to rain, if you can have something to hold the rain, to collect the rain, and also if you are hauling rain to the garden, water to the garden, if you aren't using all of it, to have something to hold it in. I'll also set out like buckets ahead of a big storm to just pour into here. Another tip is whatever container you get as a catchment system. This is not a high quality one that's meant to hold water. There are ones you can buy that are, but I was like, I'm just gonna try this. One tip is whatever water pail, right, you get for watering your garden, make sure that it'll fit comfortably in and will actually get the water. This one fits just enough to get some water to fill up, but you want to make sure it's wide enough for that. I think next year I'm probably going to try to be more diligent about watering things more often in the summer, because I think it did stunt the growth of some of the plants. Even though they survived, I think it made it less productive. Like my pepper plants, they're definitely less productive than the ones at home have been in the past years. You may also notice that I have this bamboo stick coming out of the water. One thing I realized early on, there are some salamanders and other critters that love the water. and I would find bugs and critters floating in the water if I left the lid off of it. And so I put this in, and you know what? Since I put this in, I actually haven't seen any floating on the top of the water. I feel like it's just a nice measure to help Mother Nature. One thing that I think worked pretty well was having a flower garden here. You know, you can see here, this is sort of the end and they're all tipping over of the flowers, but I have marigolds throughout the garden. Oh, I love how marigolds look and smell. I have zinnias. I also have some medicinal plants as well, like mullein and comfrey. And it's really nice to come to your garden, and if it's a day where your plants aren't, your vegetables and other things aren't doing well, you can at least have some pop of color, some beauty to sit and enjoy. And you know, I think I'm happy I did the flowers, and I'm definitely going to add more next year. I will probably maintain the path between things, and maybe even put up a little fence here to help support the flowers to not lean out over between the two paths, because it really did end up being, you know, I mean, I can't walk straight through this without moving the flowers, which is fine. I'm not afraid to touch flowers, but it just does take extra work. So I need some kind of support and trellising to kind of rein in. And maybe I'll use something like the things I got at Costco, or maybe there'll be short fences, or even just, you know, a fence, a little garden fence, you know, about hip high. This year, the tomato crops struggled. And I think for several reasons. One is, in late spring, I had some personal stuff come up and I had to tend to, and that meant that I was away from the house for almost all of May, late April, almost all of May, on and off. And while I got to do a little bit of work here, I was just very late in getting my tomatoes planted out and a lot of my other summer crops. And I think that really affected them because one, because I was so busy with personal stuff, I wasn't able to tend to them. Two, by the time I got them in the ground, the heat was already coming around. It was just too much for them. And they succumbed. Their roots weren't fully developed in the soil. And three, next year, something I'm going to do differently is I'm going to actually come out and I'm going to spray with a hydrogen peroxide water mix every week. Rusted Garden, the guy from Rusted Garden, he's a gardener in Maryland, and he does this, and it helps keep it's a very humid place here in Maryland, Zone 7A, so it helps keep the fungus and other things from happening, and I think that'll help, as well as trellising and trimming properly, but hopefully not too aggressively. So one thing that didn't go well this year was just the fact that I was so late getting things in the ground, and that was not something by choice, but it's definitely something I'm going to make certain to do better next year, because I think I'll get crops earlier and the plants will be better positioned when the heat starts coming on. The next lesson learned, or tip I'd say I could give, is that you want to have some way to bring your stuff in and set it somewhere clean and dry. If that's a little table, if that's a bucket upside down, if that's something, you'll need something like that. And you'll need to have sort of a to-go bag, a grab bag of stuff. So I have it in this basket right now, but I keep a toolbox or a garden box, which has gloves, bug spray, my trowels, string, cutting stuff, all that kind of stuff. And I take that everywhere. Every time I leave the house, I take it with me. I also try to bring baggies or bigger containers like this basket that I can take the gardening tool thing out of here if I want to fill up with produce, which I don't think I'll be doing today. But having a place to set your water. One of the lessons I learned is you really need to plan ahead when you're going to be leaving your house to come to your garden. Now, there are some days you can just come with your garden basket and a bag and a bottle of water, and that's fine. And definitely always bring some water in a thermos so it'll stay nice and cool. Some cold water in a thermos so it'll stay nice and cool if it's in the sun. But you also want to think about, Are there any special tools I need to bring this time? Do I have twine? Am I planning on trellising things up? Do I need to bring a special shovel? Because, you know, you don't have to necessarily buy one for each location. And if it's really precious to you, you're not going to want to leave it here, even if you trust the other gardeners. It's just probably not the best idea. So you want to plan ahead a little bit. And I think it's very different from when you have a home garden. You know, you can just go back in the house and get your stuff, get whatever you forgot. But when you're coming to a community garden, even if it's only 5 minutes away from home, you really need to think about what you need to bring with you. And so I think just it takes a little bit more forethought than you might expect. And that's okay. You get in the grind of figuring it out. And there are times where I'll forget something and it's not the end of the world, right? So I think that is one aspect I hadn't really thought of before. When I rented this plot, I knew it'd be a lot of work. I knew that it didn't have its own water source and that I'd have to bring water. I knew that it was covered with weeds. You know, one thing I definitely recommend is if you're thinking of taking on a community garden plot is to go and actually visit the site before you take it on. Get to know see what it looks like. Even if you can't go in, just walk around the perimeter, see what the water conditions are, see what the drainage is like, see how well other gardeners are maintaining most of the plots, things like that. And I learned a lot from that walk around, and I knew I'd have a lot of weeding to do. When you get a plot, getting in as early as possible and get going on it. Don't put it off. Start amending the soil immediately. Take a row at a time if you can, things like that. And then I think I got quite a bit accomplished, but there's still a lot I want to do, including building out the soil and doing better at weed suppression. But overall, I'd say I'm glad I got this plot. I feel like I've learned a lot. There's still a lot to do, and also something to recognize is it will take away from your other stuff. You know, I wasn't able to spend as much time on my native flower beds or on my front house garden. You know, some of it got kind of hot mess by the end of the summer. So I think the extent to which it's going to take away from other chores or tasks, it is a big undertaking for sure, I think. And the extent to which you can acknowledge that at the beginning and be prepared for it is a good idea. I definitely spent 3/4 of my summer here in this garden. Am I glad I did the garden? Yes. Am I going to do it again next year and probably for several years renting this plot? Absolutely. I think this is the kind of thing where over time I'll be able to build this into a garden that's as productive as I've been dreaming about. Yes, there will be challenges. Every year there's always challenges, but I feel like I can muscle through those, learn through those, and hopefully have some years where I have enough to really do a lot of canning. You know, my ultimate goal is to use this garden as a way to can, preserve, dehydrate, all that stuff to last, to be less dependent on the food systems and have healthier, natural, and cleaner food available for myself. All right, and my family. All right, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. There's still lots of other lessons learned, but I figured I'd touch the biggest ones. And if you are a subscriber, make sure you have the bell set so you get alerts when I post new content. And otherwise, I'll see you next time.